Hey folks, welcome to the Creative Leadership Podcast, brought to you by and from the Blue Sky Republic. My name is Arne van Oostrom, and this is my podcast, and I like doing this podcast. I like it because it's an amazing reason to invite people to have a conversation about life and about things that are important. And I hope you will be inspired by these people. Because they are, they're human beings and they go through life like all of us do, and they learn lessons, and I hope that we learn, together from them, and I do at least, and I'm really inspired. And today we're going to be inspired by Emma Jefferies. Emma Jefferies, now living in the U.S., originally from the U.K. I met her in Amsterdam and did projects together with her in Norway. And then she moved to Brazil and to India, and she did this amazing international walkabout. Anyway, we're going to talk about empathy, dyslexia. Like me, she has dyslexia. We're going to talk about resilience and courage. We're going to talk about your inner child. And we're going to talk about staying outside the system and leading a movement inside government with empathy. So enjoy.
I am very courageous and have a lot of courage and have a lot of resilience and a lot of creativity to kind of find my way around different places. I think they're kind of the key, and I like to kind of create harmony.
Harmony. And I got kind of distracted by the first word, courageous, because that's the first. That's actually, in my mind, even saying you're courageous sounds courageous, which is weird because if you are courageous, you're courageous. But often we don't consider ourselves courageous. So, why? Silly question. Why are you courageous? For prove it to me.
No. I think in terms of like dyslexia, having to be in a place where you don't fit in, and all the time you're having to work through that, and you don't fit. No systems. Everyone expects you to write or read in the right way, and there's a red pen as well. And for me now, there is a red pen, and I remember some people going through it, and now I kind of in a place of, well, I'm happy just like opening up about my dyslexia. I've always have been, but in a sense, it's a kind of a courageous journey because everyone always feels that you need to fit in somewhere. But sometimes you don't. Like, you don't fit with this model, and sometimes you have like this vision outside of what people already think of. And courage to me just like symbolizes like what my inner child has really done. Like, she's really fought a lot, and as everyone has said, has an inner child inside themselves. And she's and as a child, you really are this amazing human with lots of insights and lots of just not impressions of the world that have been forced onto you. And I feel in terms of courageous, it's like, that's why I feel I'm courageous, because I've really, really kept not adhering to systems in a sense. And I've redesigned systems as well along the process. Even for my PhD, I got to the end of my PhD and I was like, okay, the Viva process doesn't work for me. I'm gonna say, here's why it doesn't work. And that led the way for other people to really, that's the first time that anyone challenged the Viva process. So, it was a small thing about putting Post-it notes down with questions, because in that situation with dyslexia, you get really stressed, and your thought process doesn't go so well. So, but every time that's obviously led to the work that I've done in government, that I was able to like stay outside of the system and see it from outside, and then lead to a movement inside government with empathy.
So you made some big leaps there.
I totally did.
So,
You can
like,
draw me back.
so yeah, I will, because I think a lot of people are now like, what? Your inner child worked for what?
Yeah.
For government? What's happening? So I'll go back a little bit to, first of all, because the sort of inner child. So I know what you mean when you're talking about your inner child, but the way you talk about it, I think is a little bit more deeper than the way I've been thinking about it. What is your inner child? What is it, and what do you mean when you talk about that, and why is that important?
Um, it's the inner child is like lives inside everyone. It's someone. It's the everyone has someone who's playful inside of them, who is curious inside of them, but somehow I think
But
society.
is that the child that you were, or is your
Yeah, the
inner
child that
child?
you.
Yeah, but is it? Yeah, okay. So it's not like it's a separate, because if you the way you say it now, I'm thinking. So is that the child I used to be when I was a child, or is are you?
You're
Um,
still with your inner child now.
yeah, and that's just the part of you as a human being.
Yeah.
So it's not the child you were, but it's just you, who you are, but it's part of you. I know that sounds a bit vague, but please go ahead. Sorry, interrupted you.
Yeah. So everyone has this part of themselves that has an inner child, and they can have woundings that haven't really been addressed from when they were really small, but it still shows up. And sometimes that inner child rules your life in the way that you could be still angry, but you don't know why you're angry, or you could be still anxious, but you don't really know why are you actually like anxious. And it's actually, for instance, I'll go back to kind of examples when I was younger with dyslexia. It's a bit like you are taught to read in front of the class.
Hmm.
And over time, this comes to you that it's actually it's a more of a like a self-rejection kind of comes in because you're not good enough and you're comparing yourself to other people.
Right.
And in that moment, you kind of get imprinted with loads of imprints that you're not good enough or you're not enough. And in these moments, that then transfers into childhood because everyone still has these like core wounds, and that is referred to kind of as that the inner child. And the inner child is also really like amazing because they're curious, and I feel that with dyslexia that I remember being really like angry on my piano because I just couldn't express what I was feeling. I really needed this like something to really express it, and do martial arts just to get my anger out because you have been imprinted, and you have also been saying that this is not a safe environment for you to show up how you are. And that's what the systems and that's what society kind of teaches you. When you bring that totally in, like that's why sometimes you might have a tantrum or something like that. Like you can have adult tantrums. So it's just recognizing that everyone has this, has some kind of form of inner child that has been, however we've been brought up. And for me, it's like that self-rejection really creates a big us and them, and it's working through that. But I feel like that's why I've kind of kept my courage to keep on going because I see things differently, and I've kept kind of that. I'm quite playful sometimes, and like I've kept that playfulness alive inside of me, because I really didn't fit, and I didn't really conform to the systems.
Yeah. Also, so do you think I mean, because in my experience, having dyslexia, but a little bit in a milder form than your dyslexia, because when I remember really, but I know all the tricks. So because you can send me like text messages, and then I'm like, what? You have to do that again because I don't know what that says, but it's the I do remember, for instance, things like when you were in Amsterdam with us. Remember this moment that you were sitting next to me and you had to type something, and you slowly moved your laptop to me. You said, "Could you maybe?" Because maybe you're better at writing this down, because I'm not really sure. So you were like, and I thought, I know what you're doing. It's like, this is not, no, 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 because I have dyslexia too. So I know this is like, I always let other people do the writing too.
Mhm.
And it's just a silly example. I'm not really very sure if that was actually why he did it, but I remember things like that. And for me, it is, so, so I think that sometimes I can cope in the system, but because I'm as an outsider, I can cope, and I'm smart enough to cope, so I can solve it. So I went through school. It's fine. I wasn't too bad at school at all. You have your PhD. You can fix it somehow for yourself. You can. However, I don't think you can ever conform to it, that truly. So in a way, or is that, or do you feel that you could, or because I think that if you would try, if you really would try to conform, because your courage is also, which I recognize. I never thought about it as courage, more as sort of there's just no other way. I just can't do it any other way. I just can't fit. I don't fit, and I didn't know as a child why I didn't fit. It's just I thought it was just me being, I don't know. I don't. People thought I was arrogant, for instance. Some people thought I was arrogant because I had this attitude of, I don't care anyway, which is it's a defense mechanism. But I can't conform. I can't conform. I tried it many times, but I can't. So it's also, is there a choice? Isn't there just, I mean, do you have examples of people with dyslexia who were able to kind of really fit into the system?
Mm. I don't really. No, so for the people that I've talked to, because I've been really open from like the age of
Yeah,
6, I
yeah,
knew I was dyslexic, and that's really rare. And the people that find out later in life, I think they struggle because then they realize, that was
yeah,
what's wrong.
exactly. Yeah, okay. So maybe that's the difference, that you were already aware of it.
Mhm.
So when you were 6, you got a test, right? Or
Even
how?
even before that, so my mum, she was a head teacher,
Okay,
and
right. Yeah,
she's dyslexic as well,
right.
and she
Exactly.
had to really conform, and she was told she was stupid from a very early age, and for me, I was told that my mum told me that you need to work from your strengths, you need to work from where you can be yourself, like you, that because you won't, she'll not, like she had the experience of she never fitted in, so she created this supportive environment, and that was
Right.
key for me to
Yeah,
really feel
exactly.
that someone had, like, someone knows that. So all the time my experience in school was so different from what I've heard,
Hmm.
and I'm really grateful for that because everyone knew I was dyslexic and I was treated so differently. You still know that you didn't fit into the system, but I remember this time of in my English class, that they put me in front of the class, and this might sound scary, but it was just actually they put me in and they got a computer out for me to type. So I didn't have to handwrite things. So
Right.
there was a spell
Exactly.
check, but they put
Yep.
me right at the front of the. So I was kind of treated
Yep.
really positively within the whole experience. But I've had leaders talk to me to say that they're still hiding their dyslexia. I've had um, I've had people of color um, telling me that they won't. I mean, they're judged anyway, and they'll still hide it because
Right.
it's like the cognitive bias there is stupid. So for me, it's just like we need everyone's difference in the world. Like you can't hide it because there's a reason why, I still believe there's a reason why the dyslexic gene still exists. And it's so important.
Oh, interesting. So,
Yeah.
that's a scenario I haven't heard before. So, tell me more. Like, wait a minute, that sounds really good. There's a reason why that we, this sect of dyslexic people, they still exist. So, so why? Because of you need people that are kind of who do not fit in that way, or what?
I don't think it's not necessarily fitting. So I looked it up, and 50% of people in
Mm-hmm.
NASA have dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously in the creative industries, there's loads of people, and their
Sure.
ability to really connect the dots. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could see all these dots, and dyslexia was
Yeah.
always like
Yeah.
told
Sure.
to me is like you've got A to, normal people think from like A to B,
Yeah.
and you think from A to D to B, then you get back to B, or
Yeah.
you might not get back to B, but
Right.
you're connecting dots in unusual ways that lead to,
Yeah.
or you can kind of intuitively see that you've stepped 10 steps ahead and
Right.
you've left loads of people behind.
Yes. I
But
know.
the need the need for that is
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So I like the thought that there's some kind of greater intent, some master plan for the human
there. It
race
may
to have.
be, but it's still there.
But no, but I mean, it's not just people with dyslexia. I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of people who have, well, disabilities. I'm really against this idea of calling it a learning disability. Someone called a learning disability because that's the way that she was raised, and she had dyslexia, and she said it was a learning disability. And that's not true at all. It's not a disability. It's not a learning. You learn differently. And you learn other things in different ways. And I love learning. As you do. And so I think it's not a disability, but it's a disability from the point of view that if you don't fit into the dominant system, you are dysfunctional. And that's a disability because your chances of being successful or coping will be less because you don't fit into the dominant system. But I think that more, and maybe it's different now, and I know for sure it's different now than it was like 30, 40, 50 years ago, because we start recognizing that people who think differently or have a different way of looking at things, not just people with dyslexia, but just people with a different way of thinking and seeing, they're extremely valuable. Hence, the NASA 50% and the creatives, all the creative teams I work with. I mean, there's a big percentage, large percentage has dyslexia, because it comes very natural to them to kind of think differently, see different patterns, and see different solutions. So I think you might be onto something when you say it's actually part of a healthy society to have people with these different kind of ways of being wired, because that's like diversity is actually very good for an ecosystem. This is just another form of diversity. At least that's the way I've always seen it, but but maybe now we start recognizing it more and more, and also I just read. And maybe actually you sent me that article too. I'm not sure if that's an article you sent me, but I read this article about that people with dyslexia make the best spies. So it's like, oh, I should have told me when I was a kid, but this is awesome. I could be a spy, because we see things differently, and now we're sounding a little bit like these Ubermenschen, like, we're so much better than the rest because we have. That's not what I mean. It's totally not what I mean. But it's the difference, and I think if you have. If you have another, there's many people who think differently, but so maybe that's it. Do you feel that there's because when you were a child and you were, you had a mother who had dyslexia and knew what it was like. to be called stupid because of this thing that doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. But so you were kind of, you were in a protected, safe environment, and also at school they did a good job of not making you feel weird or strange or an outcast. But but do you still feel? Is there a difference between when you were a kid and now? Did something change?
So sometimes you still feel that kind of element of that, of you actually don't fit in the system. But I also, um, for me, I've had to really adjust, to meet people where they are, like to meet people where they are, and if they're going to see the difference I can bring, but also their difference, I have to be able to see similarities between people, like,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been treated so differently on a very positive way. Um, for me, I've now got to the point of really trying to see people's similarities to really create that connection. Because alone you can't change systems, and it's only together and people's passion you can move together. But you still feel, there's just odd moments that when people start correcting your work. But that's actually changed for me as well. That kind of comes to like a trigger, like you're not being understood. But actually, that for me is really gone. Um, and when people are correcting my work now, I think, oh, they said it should be like this, or it should be like this. For me, I'm really happy with that. Like, it doesn't really affect me as what it had done when I was younger. Um, and it's even caused people to then go, okay, so Emma thinks differently. So they start to like try and turn on their empathy switch to actually understand what it is like for me. Um, and I've just let go of that resistance that you have, that you can have, and that's also a barrier sometimes to like connection, and you're not seeing someone else where they're at and seeing their difference. And we all need to come to a point where everyone's difference, as you mentioned, is valued. Everyone has something that's different about them, and we are more connected than we do think as well.
Yeah, exactly. So where did you go to school, and how did you kind of, so after you so the I'm always confused with the names of schools and compared to the European systems and the British system and the American system. So is it like middle school, or what do you?
Yeah, so we have first school, middle school, and high school.
Yeah.
So all three.
So when you went to middle school, where did you go to middle school?
It was in Amble, and yeah, so I think Amble was it's like a small fishing village in the northeast of England. Yeah, it was
And
their place.
and how was that for you? You went.
That was the time that you started to get assessed and graded,
Mm-hmm.
and and I knew English was still a challenge around that time. Like, English was just like the focus. You have to be good at the English, because if you're not good at the English, as times get up to your assessments of like when you're 16, that you won't go to university because you don't have that. But I also loved the arts, and I loved doing anything creative. So they're like the really like happy moments, of that experience. But then the other one is that stress that relates to you, you not being able to write or not being able to do it as fast as everyone else. Like, I think
Exactly.
something still that's with me is that I had to put so much more effort in to a lot of this. And I think this is a lot of people like neurodiverse needs have had to put so much effort in to get to where they need to get to. And that's still with me now. Like, I put so much extra effort into what I do and trying to let go of that now, because that's not necessarily needed. But it's still imprinted in what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. and specifically the stress that it causes, because that can block your thinking, and so, and and I mentioned this before in the podcast with my daughter. She has dyslexia. She was diagnosed not too long ago, but not to my surprise, obviously, because I saw the patterns, thought, which is in a way, yeah, it's weird for me, because on the one hand I'm like sad for her, but but I'm also like, it's kind of weird, because I think it's a superpower. You just don't know it yet, because it's like really mean. It's like, yes, she has dyslexia. Somewhere there was a little voice in my head who thought, yeah, it's my girl. Yeah, that is my daughter. I'm so proud of her. She has dyslexia. She's going to be awesome, but she's going to suffer for a couple of years. But as long as she knows that. But it's the stress. It's mainly, that's how I also recognized it when she was smaller, because we're younger. Because she wasn't bad at school, and so she was smart enough to kind of get away with it. She found her ways around it. She was basically too smart to be detected, really, at first. It took a while before they caught her, basically, because you're dyslexia. But she got away with it for a long time. But it's specifically the stress. That everybody's faster. Everybody's finished faster. And then there was this stress, this fear of failure. Like, because everybody was there. And literally she would stop with one of her tests, for instance, because she saw that all the other kids were finished. Even though she still had time, she just would not finish it, because she was so both embarrassed or so stressed that she was, exhausted from the stress of not being able to finish the whole thing. So that is something that, especially at that age, right? So it's such a, because you want to be, maybe that, I'm not sure if you experience that the same way, but you want to fit in and you want to be the same. And so you don't want to be the last to finish, right? So how did you go in that? Because how old were you then when high school? Is that 15, 16, 14?
I think it's been 9 and I can't remember. Maybe 9 and 14. It's that kind of middle section.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think, yeah, you do really want to fit in. And I do remember being bullied for my dyslexia. I do remember that.
How were you being bullied because of dyslexia?
It was just in the classroom. It was just this. Well, anyway, there was just this one person that had wrote something, and yeah, it was just that I thought she was a friend, and it wasn't really. So that kind of spiraled a bit of control, and also, yeah, that really still hurts. Like, but you've got the additional stress of that peer pressure, but also I had the strength from my mum saying that you're different and use it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I also had martial arts, which was really like a good savior for me, because I was able to get that. So when you can't, for your emotional body, when you are stressed, it will create that residual like trauma inside your body. And trauma, I think, it's not trauma with a big T, but with a really small one. But that really builds up in your system, and any time you take that with you, and you need to be able to move and shift that energy out of your system. So for me, martial arts was brilliant. And although I was never really a good piano player, my parents heard that a lot. in terms of like more of that banging out, because that was the way that I could really just like move, because you have to be able to move the stress outside of your system, unless it stays there and it gets embedded in your body.
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. I never really thought about it that way, but and it's not just for dyslexia; it's just stress in general. If you have stress, yeah. So of course, I mean, it's good for everyone, and especially martial arts. If you're being bullied, that's useful. Well, I know I've done martial arts, so I know it's not about actually being aggressive at all. It's actually about control and about feeling less threatened, because you also know what will happen if you get into like a fight. And if you've never been into a fight, that's like, you don't know how that works, because I had no clue what if I'm not a fighter, I'm not violent at all, but this idea of getting into a fight is like, how does that work? I don't know. They just start punching you or something, or what's that all about? Or being threatened physically. But martial arts give you the sort of this sense of security, a little bit of at least that you know that you can actually just step away, quickly, and so, and it's kind of difficult to kind of really hit you if you know how to do that. If you can move away. Although my karate teacher always said, Arne, if you ever get into a fight, I know you're doing karate here, and you're doing really well. Don't get me wrong, but if you ever get into a fight, run. run. No, don't get, because fighting on the street, it's not the same. That's just about aggression, and I don't think you have that in you. Okay, I'll just run. So it's not like So no, my katas wouldn't help me. So then you went to high school. And so how was that? Did you kind of know, because you were interested in creativity, in art, but did you kind of have a sense of, a direction that you're saying, yeah, this is what I want to go and do? Or is that later?
No, not really. I don't think I've really had that ever. There's never been that, okay, well, you don't really know what the next step is. And as I mentioned, that my mum was just saying, as long as you get past your GCSE, she didn't mind what I did. And I suppose I was just really fortunate that I had so much support around that part, which is our 16-year-old grade, that I went to do design and technology, and I went to do art, and I went to do maths as well as my A-levels. And then I got to, I think that just the pressure of the exams was so hard, but then I think that period of time was just stress as well. And but I was really lucky to go into arts, to do art, and to do and go and do that in my degree. And the degree, you never really then had to do exams, which I was so happy about. Because so when you do your degree in multimedia design, I got accepted based on a portfolio of work. So exam pressure was a bit off for me near the end of that, and I had so much support from the teachers. So again, it was a really supportive environment, but still there was times that you obviously do feel outside and you're not conforming, and still they'll want you to read out loud as well in front of the class, and I'm like, just stop this, please. It doesn't make sense. But they'll still do it, and
but they'll still
do it. You've got to be confident in reading out loud, and like, well, as long as I can find my own way.
Yeah.
And again, that's what I suppose I was just embedded, was like, you have to find your own way around it, and it will find your. I was using all of the early Adobe software, or I was using AutoCAD, and I was doing 3D modeling in terms of like bringing all of that work in. And I was one of the first people to kind of have a digital design portfolio, like really with all of the 3D drawings and so forth. So I think
what year are we talking?
Oh, I don't, like 2000 and maybe 2000. I don't know. Like really, really, I remember using AutoCAD really, really early. My dad used to bring copies back from work. So I used to just be able to use the software to find an outlet for, like, this is actually what things look like, and be able to show that. So it was really, I think it was maybe Photoshop I can't remember the year, but it was like one of the early Photoshops 1.2, like it's
Right.
really, really early. But I used to love
Yeah,
that.
because before that it was, I think it was called Quark
Oh yeah,
Express.
Cork. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I work with that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the, your age. You can tell your age by the software that you've used throughout your life. So I won't go on because I've used the software that now it seems very ancient. It's like really, yes. But your father brought copies. So what did your father do?
My father's an engineer.
Hmm.
So he designed resistors. He designed machines to make resistors, and these resistors could do anything. And
Right.
he was really supportive in like helping me build whatever I wanted to build. So we
Huh.
had loads of like amazing moments of just building like and thinking about this chair that wouldn't really function, but how can we make it function for like an art
Right.
project? Or he would build certain things that would help me kind of do my art projects, and very, very supportive and like
Cool.
and sit with me going normal spell checking because my mum couldn't sit with me all that time. So yeah.
Well, it sounds like your parents are awesome. At least you had a great experience as a child growing up in that environment. Because I mean, the support. I've experienced the same myself. I think it's part of being able to, being more comfortable with yourself. But my mother's an artist and my father's more the scientist, and so I take both. So I have both of these voices in my head still. Do you have so it's similar? What did you take from your, besides dyslexia, from your mother and from your father? What are the two things you could say? Well, that's inside of me still.
So I think for my mum, it's definitely she's been like that's where I get my courage from,
Right.
because she still to this day is working with schools and changing schools and making them like her. She made her school an outstanding school, and she's just kept on going and so resilient, like so resilient. And for my dad, I would say that his like ability to build, and he's always problem solving all, all the
Yeah.
time and tinkering with things. And even if when I was younger, like maybe a jewelry would like break or something like that, I'd put it on the top, and he would come back and like
Cool.
have fixed it. And the curiosity for how um, things work. I know my brother got that as well, because he just loved to unpack things and how things work. But sometimes my brother can put them back together. That's another story.
Yeah.
But but it's like, oh, how does this work? Or like I
Yeah.
think I really got from my dad. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, it made me think of my own that my own inner child. Still, I think it still wants to do this, but when I was a real child, I love. So my parents had these old transistor radios, like from my grandparents. I think old radios, beautiful, and they were in the attic. And one day I took them apart because the inside was like an alien landscape. They had all these tiny little electrical thingies and transistor thingies, and I had no clue what they were, but they still don't. So no, I couldn't put it back together ever. It was like, oh, okay, but I just didn't notice because I was so kind of, it's like an addiction. Like I wanted to kind of, I started with this one thing, and then I had to take off the other thing, and what's here, what's behind this, and what happens there. And then I looked up and like, oh, I think I destroyed like 3 antique radio.
Yeah.
I think my parents inherited from their parents. Oh, okay. So but it's a curiosity is something that is, I think it's a creative force, and courage and resilience, and I think all of those things are if you I mean they're very useful things to have, right? So when you were at high school and you had to kind of decide what comes next, what did you have a clear, or was it still like because you are kind of the way I hear it's like, and also I know you are um, a wanderer. Sorry if I may use that word. Was that already there, or
I think I liked Photoshop. I liked Photoshop, and I wanted to go and do something with Photoshop, and that was like literally like why I chose my design degree course, and it was creative, and I wanted to do something with, because I played about with all the softwares. I wanted to do something with that, and yeah, that was like there was nothing really much more than like that part of it, which is not very wondrous compared to what I do now. But then that's where I started.
Yeah.
And I just loved doctorizer and things as well.
But you don't know what you don't know. I mean, I mean, right? So like there's a thing called Photoshop, and but you don't know the world that you can kind of enter, through that. I don't know.
I think you don't know when you're 16 at all. You don't know where you can, because I think I've been to many careers advisors over the time, even at the like just different parts, and they didn't know what to do with me.
Really?
Yeah, but it's like even like so I want to, and they would sometimes say, "Oh well, you can't do that," and they're like, "Well, okay, well, what's the next?" So it was always just like looking for that next step where you would, I suppose, feel fulfilled, and what would that look like?
So how does a conversation like that go? I mean, if you go to a career advisor, what's that conversation like?
With the
when did they realize like
there was one at the end of my friend Claire, she said, "Oh, just go and talk to the careers advisor." I says, "They won't be able to help." And she said, "I'll just go and talk to them." I was like, "Okay, I'll go and talk to them." And I says, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I says, "Well, I want to go and work around the world and like find out how the design discipline's evolving." And that's when I connected with you over that. And she goes, "Okay, but how are you going to do that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'll go and find out." So, and because I always would feel, I mean, I'd been in education for a long time after doing both degrees and then PhD, like both of them. And I just really there was a fundamental need. I just needed to explore like what was out there and what was really what was out there.
But why did you want to go find out about that? Why was it? Because there's so much to find out. So what makes you go like, no, I want to understand the design, the evolution of this design principles and the world of design and where it's going. Where did that come from? Especially at that time, it wasn't such a, I mean, it wasn't that apparent. I mean, it wasn't, at least, I mean, it was a small community of people who were focused on that. We just started.
Yeah. I think for me, it was like I was during the time that I was in, and I'm so thankful for like Northumbria University, because you got exposed to all of the thinking around design and the social impact, and I was so interested in the social impact work of it, and how can you,
because at the university you were exposed to that kind of thinking.
We had loads of design of our times, which was a really big design event in Newcastle, with loads of different social projects, and like really like seeing what bringing humanity and being human, like what does that actually do, and how can maybe it was a save the world thing, I don't know. But at the time it was like, how can you go and find out about where design's going and how it's doing, because everyone would tell you these stories, but like my curiosity gets the better of me. It's like, but I want to go and explore. And I think another thing is like just looking back is like people are really amazing, and you can be so shaped by different people along the way. And I was fascinated with meeting all of you, and then the Brazilians. Like I had But
Yeah.
it is a
Well,
journey.
for people who don't know what you're talking about, you are
Yeah.
because we're on air. No, it's just, I no, I because we you approached us after because you finished your PhD already,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we I want to talk about that as well, because for a lot of people with specifically with dyslexia, not just with dyslexia, but specifically with dyslexia, a PhD seems like very alien. It's like, how do you get there? Don't you if you have dyslexia. So, but before we get there, just quickly, you after you did your PhD, you connected to us, so Design Thinkers in at that time in our first new little studio in Amsterdam, and and then so you worked and you asked for a if you could be an intern. So for us, it was like you did your PhD. How what do you mean? And you were doing this walkabout. I don't know. That was what was it called? Was it
International walkabout. Yeah.
international
It was,
walkabout? Yeah.
yeah.
And you had a website and I had and so you were sharing these stories and so we worked together for maybe like a year or so. I guess it must have been something like a year, and then you moved to Brazil to the team that now is part of Design Thinkers, but then at that time was called Boel. They had an
Mm-hmm.
agency, and you connected us there too. So you were both someone who was looking for connection and looking for people, but you're also connecting at the same time. So you kind of left a trail basically, and still do,
Yeah.
which is so while wandering around, you weren't like you're not disappearing. You're building also these and strengthening connections at the same time. So I thought I always really thought that was a very beautiful thing to do because and also using that community around you, for instance, for writing a book, by gathering stories, et cetera, et cetera. So that's sort of a little bit of a context for the story. But I want to just briefly go to your PhD because when did you decide? Because a PhD, I know people who've done PhDs, and for them that's like the worst thing ever. It takes them years, and it's suffering and pain and frustration. But how did you decide to do a PhD, and how did that go, and what was it about? And just tell me.
So I had my final year degree show, and one of the professors came to me and says, "Do you want to do a PhD?" And I was like, "Oh, why not? I've never done one of them." And it
Oh,
wasn't a conscious effort to say that I'll do one.
of course
But
not. It's like just someone just asked you. So the short answer is they just asked me and I said yes.
yeah, and I was like, "Oh, well, they're going to pay me to do it as well." And I'm like, "Well, that sounds good." And the subject was
Good point.
visual literacy.
Yeah.
And visual literacy was really a passion because it's about everyone seeing differently.
Right.
And it's everyone, and they're going to pay me to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll do that. so I think about maybe like a month or two later, I had my interview for my PhD, and I was 21. And my friend Joyce, who I wrote the first book with, she just said to me, "Emma, you don't want to be doing this. Like, go and explore. Like, go and explore first, then come back and do this." And I'm like, "No, I think I want to do this." so that's how I started. And it is a slog. It is really hard. But I had to keep on finding my own ways around writing and everyone, because it was in a design department. Design PhDs are so rare. Now they're much more. Having people have design PhDs is not so rare as it was before. But they're like, yeah, find your own way around how you go about doing this. And so there was a lot of like either sketching or sketching out my ideas that was more accepted.
Right.
But you still had to write papers. You still had to get these down, and I still had people with red pens. I do remember that. So going through all my work. But I had again, another supportive, and this was the first time I suppose I had an international group of people around me doing my PhD. They were from all different areas, and that was when I was coming from a really white background and white environment. I had loads of people with different diverse thoughts, and I found it fascinating. I was like, this is really like brilliant. And everyone was just so supportive. Again, it took me a long time, and that's why I wanted to obviously explore afterwards. I've been here too long, get me out of here. But I had amazing experiences, and I did a series of videos about my experiences of writing, reading, and I called them PDH. Anyway, that's the series of videos, and I had people connecting with me about the videos and how I had learned to write and how I had learned to like have 3 levels of writing. I've got 3 levels where I just get everything down, and that's probably how most people receive my text messages. Just get everything down. And the second level is actually, no, let's try and find the critical thinking paths. And critical thinking was a huge thing for me around that time of really reading into critical thinking and how do you put together arguments, because we're not taught that.
Right.
And then really getting down to the detail. But when you're faced with like this huge booklet of this chunk, like I really like, and I had that one and an appendix as well, which was a long page. And then you're told at the end of it that you need to rewrite the whole thing to make, because it's really valuable. And I did win awards for my PhD. Like, it's really valuable. You need to rewrite it. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's just get on and do it. So it's a suppose of like this really amazing learning experience, but also such a stressful experience. And near the end of it, you don't really take care of yourself so much, because it's like you're just focused on just getting this damn thing done and out of your life. Yeah. But it's also amazing to think that you can do such a thing, and people were really responsive to the videos, and I still had people connecting back with me and wanting to have calls about the videos I had created, and I had some people just crying because they never could fully show up and show their dyslexia.
Right. Yeah, that's it. That is a so my experience with that is that so I try to kind of, every time I have a talk at a conference or so, or I want to mention that I have dyslexia, not because I want to kind of have attention for it, like, oh, but it's, but I know there's someone in the audience. There's always a couple. There's always a bunch of, like, more than I know, because not all of them respond, but there's always someone responding, like, oh, that's so nice to hear that there's someone, that has dyslexia, and you seem to be functional. You seem to be okay. You're on the stage, so you must have done something successful, which is not always true, by the way, but still. But yeah, and people do feel it can be very emotional for people, and specifically for people, I think, who struggled very much because they didn't come from a very sort of supportive background or environment, and they were told they were stupid, and just couldn't figure out why. And I had someone the other day tell me, it's actually on one of the podcasts, that he found out when he was a copywriter at a advertisement agency, and he was working very late, and he was writing, and he was struggling with it, and then his mother called, and he said, I'm working really late. I have to write this, and I'm struggling with it. And she said, of course, because you have dyslexia. And he was like, what? What do you mean? Yeah, we didn't tell you. Because, but you have dyslexia. Yeah, but when you're a kid, you can't remember. But we, and he's like, that explains so much. You managed to do it, rightfully proud that you actually managed to do so, and then you wanted to get out, and you kind of tasted, and you had a taste of an international environment. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that made a difference, but this, like, okay, there's more to explore, and I want to get out. And so then you came up with this idea of this walkabout, right? So how did that start?
Joyce said, I said, what should I do after a PhD? She goes, well, you can go and work around the world. And I'm like, but how do I do that? So that's really came from that conversation with
Uh-huh.
Joyce.
Right.
And then Joyce said, well, if you're going to do that, we should write a book. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I've just wrote one already in terms of the PhD. And she says, oh, no, we'll do it. We can do this. So with me and Lauren and Joyce Yee and Lauren Tan, that's when it kind of like started. And like I would go and do the capturing around the world. And yeah, it was. I think it was just again, it was what you said before. It was like a need just to connect with people, and every person I've connected with have shaped you and shaped your understanding of the world around them. And I'm so grateful for like every experience I had with working with different people in different environments, because it's like every time I love the first day I've been in a new country, because it opens your eyes to so much you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, but still, for someone who would listen and think, "Wow, that sounds nice," travel around the world and meeting new people, working. How? Because that sounds very. I mean, you're like, yeah, and I just did it. Like, you don't just do that. It's like I think, or maybe you do. I don't know. But for a lot of people, there will be like Barry. Like, who do I? Where do you start? How do you go about doing that? So,
Mhm.
I mean, I know it's like these are actually quite simple things, but what are those things that would? How did you get to your first or your second and locations? And because you were in Brazil, you were in India, you know, Amsterdam, but how did that?
Um,
You phoned them like, "Hello,
so I
you
think
don't
it
know
just
me, but I'm
again it
coming."
goes it goes back to my support group of just having they had different ideas of how that could happen.
Uh-huh.
Um, and one of my friends, Vicky, she just said, well, you can put a international design research map up on your
Hmm.
website,
Yeah.
and show all the different research places around the world, purely for the fact that we're doing the book and we're interested in connecting with people and
Hmm.
creating the connections, and having conversations. I think it goes back to just a bit of resilience on my behalf. Like, I'm
Hmm.
going to keep on doing this. I'm going to keep on having conversations and find out where can I add value and where can I help different teams, and putting together a portfolio. That was the other part of it as well. But I think, I don't know, it was a really random time that I was able to. I'm still surprised I was able to make it work, but it did happen, and we had such a good time. And I think it was just creating connections and being open with people along the way. That was really really key for me.
Yeah, and I think it's when we started the conversation where you said you described yourself as courageous and being able to find your way around things, and and obviously this is one of those kind of moments where you need some courage and be able to find your way, so make it work, but also just have the courage for someone who you just started out really, and then you did your PhD, quite safe environment, and then all of a sudden you go and have a walkabout, the international walkabout, and you find yourself in Brazil, for instance, and with a group of guys
That I never met before.
you never met before.
And we only interviewed the ones we talked to each other when we were, I think
Yeah,
it was in Mario's house. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that was very exciting. But it's and yeah, so I hear what you're saying, that because yeah, of course you make connections, and it takes some courage, but that's also why it's such a unique experience, because not that many people are able to do so, or just are willing to do so, or willing to take that chance. And if you do, you get so much out of it, so many beautiful connections and encounters. And so then you, because that was the book. What was the title of the book?
It was called, the first one was called Transitions, and then the second one that led to the second one after that. Yeah, but the first one was Transitions.
Yeah, that was transitions. Yeah, design transitions. That was the first one. Yeah, and so what happened after? So you did all this because you work with these different teams around the world. I mean, we worked together. We did projects in Norway together, which was fun. Strange project still, but anyway, that's another podcast. And so then what happened after? So after you finished with wandering around the planet.
Yeah. I did a couple of different freelance projects for different, like as a consultant. And then I wanted to really come back home and ground, like come back to Newcastle and ground, and really get a sense of like who I was after all of that traveling. Because it took I mean, it's amazing, and you get shaped in so much ways. And at that time, I was really interested in what government were doing, and then that's when I started to work in government, and yeah, I was fascinated and felt like there was just so much opportunity, and I've seen so much of user research. You do user research, and then it doesn't get implemented. So I saw user research being implemented, and I loved seeing people and listening to people's stories. So naturally went in and did user research more in government.
And where in government exactly? Was it the...
It's the UK tax office.
Yeah, there was the tax office, right? So,
yeah.
And what was the thing that kind of you take with you from that time? What was the sort of the main experience that you say, okay, that was really a learning point for me? What was the thing that made you, I don't know, grow? Because you didn't work. I mean, now because you worked. Obviously, when you did your PhD, you were in a university environment, which is also a large kind of, not really corporate, but it's political environment. Yeah, I don't know the university you were, but in my experience, they can be quite like they can function almost like businesses in a way, with competitions and stuff, politics going on. But then you move and you to the world, the planet, and you work with these teams, and then all of a sudden you are at the tax office. So in my mind, it's like, boom, that's a different planet, right? Yeah. Was it that, or was it just like you just took it the way?
It was. I mean, in some respects it was, but they were also bringing a digital team in. In a sense, there was really a lot of energy that was coming in at that time, and it was for me important to. I had all of this knowledge. I really wanted to be with an organization where I could use it and have an impact on the people around me, and that's why I went back to Brazil after a long time. And I remember having the conversation, the interview for HMRC, and I was like, yeah, I want to go and work there, because it's a bit like all of this knowledge that I've had, they're now ready for it. Like now you have to pick the time when people would be ready for whatever you can offer, because if you're thinking like 10 steps ahead, like you really have to meet people where they're at.
Right.
And I suppose the key learning is just to really try and connect with people and find out about them. And that's what I did do when I joined the tax office.
And were you able to change things that you wanted to change? Were you able to get stuff done?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of, I'd always talked about empathy right from the start, of having understanding different people, and I was just finding that we weren't listening to each other, and that's why projects weren't working, and that led to doing a lot of work before that about team empathy, before coming to the tax office, and really then implementing a program of empathy inside of the government that as people have so much energy towards, and building a community around it has been amazing. And the last we're now 5 years in, and the community of people, I was first of all seen as a bit different. It's been described as maybe disruptive right at the start, going in and working with them, but somehow moving to the point when I was more guiding towards what it could be like, but then meeting people where they were at, so I couldn't jump ahead. Although I would love to have jumped ahead, and then building that people that were advocates for empathy, with now 3 government departments doing the empathy program and starting to build a cross-government community to spread empathy across the government. So it's I think it was all of the learnings that I had picked up across the way that somehow came up at different points that I had when I was traveling. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe try this part or try this part, but keep on going, because inside of you what you have to offer, and you have to keep on trying to see if you can offer that. And it might be something totally outside of the field of people's reference, but you can build up people's reference books, and they can build up both of us can collaborate much better.
And and that's 5 years in the program, you said?
It's 5 years until kind of all of the implementation of where we're at now, and having different government departments. So it's a slow growth, and I've had to learn patience.
Are you still connected to the program?
Yeah, I'm still connected to the program, and we're still building that community, and hopefully next year we'll have a big enough community my hope is that we have a big community that we're able to onboard different government departments, and they're able to think about what an empathetic government looks like.
So empathy became a focus point, right? So is that something that you, I mean, did that slowly grow, or was that already in your mind? Like, it's because I know now a lot what you do is specifically around empathy, which is a language, I guess, because it I mean, there's a lot, it's not, so it's a complicated topic, and it covers a lot. So it's easier to talk about empathy, I think, still than to talk about things like design thinking or stuff like that, because it is something that people all kind of think they know, but also that makes it really difficult, I guess, as well. But is empathy, is that now your topic, your theme? Is that where your heart is? Yeah.
For me, I've had to learn. I think it's not something shared, but I just realised that I've connected over this year. It's more been like empathy for me, and having self-empathy is more been that kind of the healing journey along the way.
Right. Because this is where we get to the inner child again.
Yeah.
Right? Right. So because is that part of empathy, or is that the key of I lost my words, but is that sort of the most important part of getting empathy, or understanding what empathy is, if you can connect to your inner child, or understand your inner child, or have sort of...
I think that's my most recent kind of work that I'm doing. And your inner child is really your emotional body. It's like however your emotions come up, and they're all coloured.
Right.
It's your emotional body. Yeah, any emotions that you have. Okay. That's where your inner child comes from.
Okay.
But along the way of like doing mindfulness has really helped me focused on the present. So I'm not getting ahead of myself, or compassion has led me to understand similarities in people as well as myself, and release self-judgment. So there's been a lot of stages of like development with each different part of empathy work that I feel like, as well as it's been my work, it's been something that has allowed me to really show up for other people, because I'd be able to like have a different relationship with myself.
Is self-leadership, self-empathy, leadership in general, but specifically connected to empathy. Is that something that, because I'm listening to you, and I speak a lot about empathy, and I hear a lot of other people talk about empathy, and it's a bit, and sometimes I'm thinking it's just because I'm interested in it, so I hear more about it because I'm looking for it. It's my spotlight basically. So anything about empathy, I'm drawn to it. Or, but I'm also thinking, is there like, am I seeing a pattern that empathy is becoming more, and the language around empathy maybe even becomes more accepted, maybe because people like Brene Brown, becomes quite known, and she writes and talks about it, and so it becomes more an accepted topic. Is that, or is it just me just discovering it? Because that also happens often, that I discover something new, and then everybody's like, "No, it's been around for ages. What are you talking about? You are new to this. We've been in there." So how do you see that? Is it because the way I listen to you, it's also something that you are developing and sort of a deeper knowledge of, and sort of how is that for you? Is it a topic that people talk about more often than they used to?
I think maybe in Corona and COVID-19,
Oh, well, there
it's
you go.
definitely, yeah, I think
Is that
it's
it?
open. Before that, if I was talking about empathy in the tax office or empathy anywhere before that, people would be a bit like, no, especially in England, don't talk about emotions.
That's
But
something
I
with
definitely,
emotions.
we
Find your
don't
inner
do
child. No thanks.
it.
Get away from me.
but um,
I can see your inner child. It's
the
crying. It's crying. No, sorry. Sorry. No, I can see the disruptive. There she is again. The inner
but the
child.
thing,
Sure.
I think obviously it's become more publicized and more needed by Brené Brown's work, and that's amazing. And there's
Yeah.
loads of other people that are
Sure.
really starting to bring up the subject that we need emotions at work. But the Brazilians were the ones that really like opened me up. They would have I
Really?
would yeah they would have it would hug me every morning, and that's not something as an English person. I remember,
Right.
and that connection with for me. So there's just been a lot of moments I said where people have shaped me along the way, and it's like triggered me to kind of keep on developing.
Because they hugged you because they had right. And you're like, what are they doing?
Yeah, and you have to get used to it. And like when I get
Oh,
used to
wow.
it, and then I
Yeah,
saw
yeah, yeah. Yeah, right. And then you went back to England and you're like, nobody's hugging me.
they do sometimes, but not as much as like every morning is like a
Yeah, no,
thing.
I know.
Like
It's true. Yeah. No, no,
it's
I
and you
get it.
can feel the warmth of people as well. So for me, that was really like
Exactly.
important. Whereas
Sure.
bringing that into an environment of government, that's not there. But there are so many people that have a lot of empathy in government, like a huge amount, and it can be really increased. So
Of course. Yeah.
um, I think it was about building stories and having that acceptance in that environment. But I think we are talking about it more because we are all human, and sometimes, and I've heard people
Yeah.
say that they're a number, and that gets me really angry.
Hmm.
But just a number in the system, and I'm like, you're not. You're a
Yeah.
human, and you have emotions.
Yeah. You're a human in the system, but
Yeah.
no, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so no, it actually, what you just mentioned, like it's, in this pandemic, it has, maybe that's what I was feeling like, all of a sudden, because people are talking about, I mean, I talk about empathy a lot because it's part of what we do, is part of the work. And slowly for me as well, the journey is towards actually empathy starts within, because how can you understand someone if you're not connected to yourself, because you are a filter. And so my latest my latest thinking on empathy was, um, and again, I'm always like, going back and forth, like, what it is and what it's not, and what, but to me, what helped me personally, it's just me personally, is that I started recognizing that, empathy. So the other day I asked the group, what is empathy to you? And they say, walking in someone else's shoes, seeing the world through someone else's eyes. And to me, uh, I think it is actually different. It is actually by saying that you cannot see the world through
Yeah.
someone else's eyes. You can't walk in someone else's shoes. By acknowledging that, that's the beginning of real empathy, because it means that you have to first listen and work with them, take them along with you, because they see things differently, and you will never be. How can I ever be someone who, for instance, came from Syria as a refugee in the Netherlands, Spain? How can I have built real empathy with that person if it's just looking through their eyes? I can't. It's impossible, because they're wired, shaped differently. Their inner child, is hurt in very many different ways.
Mhm.
I don't know that. They even don't know that often. So it's this actually, so to me, it was more the opposite almost of saying, it's actually by being able to, by saying to yourself, you cannot, and that is the sort of real empathy, because then I start, oh, then I really have to listen to you and take you along and work with you and see how you solve things differently or see things differently, and hopefully getting together. But I always will see the world through my filter, my biases. So that's sort of my latest experience. But your inner child isn't something I talk about. The sort of I kind of phrase it as, or talked about it as, your origin story, sort of
Mhm.
how. But I like the inner child. It does something to me. It's kind of when you mention it, I literally pictured it like a little
Yeah.
Arnie inside.
There is.
No, I know it is, but it's nice because it's like I can picture it, I can feel it as an entity, and there is a voice in my head. I'm not sure if it's a child, because it's often a lot wiser than I am.
Sometimes
So,
it can be. It
no,
can get your ego. It can get your ego in check. It can tell you
yeah.
what's.
Well, it's truthful,
Yeah,
as a
it is.
child is, right? It will tell you what it is, and says, no, you don't want to do that. Be quiet. Be quiet. Yeah. So that's the. Yeah, so I like it, and I really like this idea that it started with the Brazilians, my
Mm.
friends, and they'd be very. Do they know?
Yeah, because
Yeah, so
they opened the ability to open my heart was the way, like, was the ability then to connect with my husband because he's from Latin America. So
really?
yeah, so
There's a link there too.
yeah, because so I said people like, and how they showed up during that time when I was with them and how they changed me was ability to like really connect with them, my husband, and like really be able to be with
Yeah,
him, because they're like his family are all about like saying goodbye to his family takes about an hour because you have to hug all of them and hug all of them again, but they show up and how emotionally they show up for you and how present they are
yeah,
is amazing. So I'm really blessed to have all of them now in my life.
yeah. That's all. So that's so, yeah. So that's nice. I didn't know that, that there was a connection between those. That there always is, obviously, but it just me. I know them, so that's nice. That makes me proud. They should be proud too. But I know exactly what you're saying, because that's I have that. I have a similar experience with them emotionally. So what are you? And I hear him sneezing in the background, I think. I It's a very Latin way of sneezing. No, I don't think there's
It's
such
very loud. Sometimes
a. See,
that's quiet.
yeah, no, but so where, because you moved to the US,
Yeah.
why? What happened?
So I met my husband in Thailand, and
Yes,
then
still
and
that makes
then
no sense. No.
that makes no sense. And then he lives over here, so
Okay.
and then so this is why
Yeah.
why we're in Portland, and Portland again feels like another amazing place where there's so diverse. Like diversity is like this is one of the most liberal places, and it's so diverse. It seems like another place where you can really like grow and find people, not in
Yeah.
COVID times, but after, where you can really
Yeah.
find difference, and people actually in this city celebrate difference, like my husband moved here because he's truly felt like he belongs, even though he's a person of color, and like he feels like he belongs here, even though it's a really predominantly white place.
So how long have you been? Because it's like most of it. That's because COVID is. I mean, when did you move?
It was
Recently.
about a year and a half ago now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. So most of the time you've been in a lockdown.
COVID. Yeah,
Good timing.
yeah,
Uh,
in time.
yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Just you got in right in time before they locked the place down. That's true, though. That is true. It could have been very different. And what are you doing? And what are you doing? And where are you moving towards now?
Thanks. So I want to be able to spread empathy in the world, and the programs that I've got now are a really good way of starting the conversation
Yeah,
inside
you sent
organize.
me a picture of a poem.
Oh yes, that was really that was ages ago that I wrote that one as
Ah,
well.
really? Because that's really beautiful. Oh, I thought it was something that.
No,
Ah,
it was a poem I wrote ages ago for it's called for like this book which is Forgiven
yeah,
Letters.
forgotten letters. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's
Um
beautiful. But
it's an
so
anthology of all dyslexic writers.
yeah, that's awesome. But so is there something like that coming up, or what is next?
So I think that's where mostly my intent is focused on, and working with design thinkers in the US to really start to think about how do we do that, and how do we start to. I'm still working with the UK government to build that, help support them build the community because they're doing it now.
Hmm.
And I would like to be able to see how you can really make systemic change inside, because ideally, like our society, organizations are an echo of society. Like they literally are just how they show up. And if I can use organizations themselves can be this really perfect vehicle for turning
Hmm.
empathy back on. And
Hmm.
there's really good article and research that there's been a decline in empathy for the last 40 years. So how can we get people to turn it back on, and how can we work with organizations to really turn empathy back on and being human at work being okay?
Yeah, and any concrete plans you're developing?
um Start having conversations. See this is the last time, and see
Yeah,
where it
it's
goes.
the best way.
Yeah,
No, no,
yeah.
I'm truly a believer in because it sounds very simple, like I'm just going to have conversations, but we don't. I mean, having real dialogues, real conversations, specifically with an intent, and that's I think because of the decline in empathy. I think that part of the decline is that we're not having any dialogues anymore. We don't have real conversations, and it reminds me of. And I don't know his name or where to find it. I was just because it's already it's like 4 years ago. It's when Trump was elected, and so many people who didn't vote for Trump were so angry at the people who voted for Trump, and the people who voted for Trump were so totally angry with people who didn't, because everybody's angry at each other like now, but a little less. It's getting worse, but it was a little less worse, but it was still there. And specifically, people who didn't vote for Trump, you just did not understand. They thought everybody who voted for Trump was crazy. They must be totally crazy. And there was a student who then who just didn't understand why people could vote for this guy. He started doing interviews, and he went around the country interviewing people who voted for Trump, but with a open mind, just
Mm-hmm.
listening, not with no judgment whatsoever, asking open questions, having one stories. And when you read those, you're thinking, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of, yeah, there's something there. I get it. I understand. I understand. Still, I don't agree, but yeah, it made it more mild and understandable and human, because there's people behind it, and there's people with concerns and with genuine, fears or worries or whatever, and they might be totally opposite of yours, but if you if you truly have a conversation, you kind of get really close. You basically agree on the basics of happiness and health and what you want to have out of life. And that's a great way to start, because that you can connect there. You don't have to agree on other things if you can connect on that level. And I love that. And I think, but to your point, it's also very sad at the same time, because we are experiencing that it's totally in decline, and we can't have those conversations anymore. So you saying starting having conversations, I think that is the solution. So I'd be very happy to follow your next adventures. Yeah, and see where that leads. And happy to also hear that you'll be working with the design thinkers in the US. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to see. Is there a plan for a next book? Is there?
No, not at the moment.
No?
There is probably sometime in the future, but not at the moment. I'll need to find someone to collaborate with me to help me, write anything within the collaboration. All of them have been in collaboration, so yeah.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for having this conversation with me. It was very, very, very good to hear. I mean, I've known you for quite a while, but there were still a few things that I didn't know, or connections that I didn't know were there. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I'll invite you back when I'm going to have more of a special around dyslexia with some other people also, to talk a little bit more about specifically dyslexia. And I hope at least that you like to join that, because I think because I think it's an important. I think it's an important. Because it's not just about dyslexia. It is just about being wired differently, and it's an example of what that can do to you as a human being with your insecurities, and so I think it can maybe resonate with other people, who also have disabilities, if you will, other talents like us. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been really good to talk.